You do not know me completely, not yet. The mystery deepened with every new simulation. The sun's orbit across the galaxy showed slight deviations, subtle ripples that aligned with the black hole's pull. The path of ancient interstellar dust streams bent gently toward the same region of space. Even the distribution of cosmic rays showed strange shadows where none should exist, all pointing to the same unseen presence. Still, no announcement was made, not because of secrecy, but because of uncertainty. A theory this large demanded caution. A discovery this profound demanded patience. And so, quietly, humanity waited and watched and wondered. Beyond the inner planets, beyond the frozen worlds of the Kuiper Belt, beyond even the whisper-thin bubble of the heliosphere, the dark region of interest remained calm, silent, still, unrevealing. The black hole, if it existed, made no sound, no light, no movement measurable by human eyes. But it pulled, softly, patiently, eternally, like a silent partner in a dance older than life. In time, the mystery transformed. It stopped being about proof, stopped being about detection. It became something quieter, a reminder of cosmic perspective, that even the sun, mighty and radiant, could feel the gravity of a shadow. That space, vast and cold, still held secrets within arm's reach. That humanity's understanding of home was incomplete, and that the universe, in its grand silence, still kept surprises. Maybe the object was nothing more than a mathematical ghost. Maybe the anomaly had an explanation waiting just beyond the next discovery. Maybe the solar system was playing tricks with physics. But maybe not. Maybe a tiny black hole truly moves through the outer dark, bound to the sun in a slow, eternal orbit. Maybe it watches the planets with the indifferent patience of ancient gravity. Maybe it has been there all along, shaping the solar system in silence. In the end, the universe offered no confirmation, no denial, only the deep, endless quiet of cosmic space. A quiet that asked the simplest, most haunting question: what else waits in the dark? And in that question lived the mystery, a mystery vast enough to stretch across time, subtle enough to hide behind the sun, and powerful enough to move a star without ever revealing itself. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was everything. But somewhere in the cold, patient dark beyond the planets, something tugged at the sun, and the sun responded. And that quiet response was enough to begin the story.
In the days that followed, fate stopped pretending to be subtle. Adrian kept telling himself he was only passing through that street because it was on the way. It wasn't. His driver knew it. His assistant knew it. Even the navigation app knew he was lying to himself. But something about that narrow road, with its cracked pavement, hand-painted signs, and imperfect charm, made the noise in his mind finally go quiet. It wasn't just the street. It was the way life seemed to breathe there. Slow, unpolished, profoundly honest. And somewhere in the middle of it all, there was her. Ilara became an unspoken part of his days long before she became part of his life. He would glimpse her through the wide studio windows, sleeves rolled up, hair loosely tied, sometimes streaked with paint, sometimes dusted with chalk. Children gathered around her like she was a small sun in a small galaxy. She bent down to their height when they spoke, listening with the kind of attention people give only to things that truly matter. Adrian watched the way her eyes softened when a child showed her a drawing. He watched how she smiled, not only with her lips, but with something deeper, something that seemed to rise from her chest and light her entire face. He didn't know it yet, but he was already learning her by heart. The second time they truly spoke, the sky was heavy with clouds threatening rain. Ilara stood outside the studio, struggling to balance a box of art supplies on one hip while locking the door. The box tilted, wobbling dangerously. Brushes rattled, canvases bent. Adrian stepped forward before it could fall. "I've got it," he said, calm and steady, his hands already securing the weight. She looked up startled, then let out a soft, grateful laugh. "You again." The words slipped out before she could stop them, and a brief flush warmed her cheeks. She hadn't meant to sound like she'd been paying attention to him. But she had, every day in tiny ways, in reflections on glass, in quick glances, in the way her pulse noticed him before her mind admitted anything. He smiled, a gentler version than the one printed in magazines. "Seems so." He lifted the box with ease. "Where would you like this?" She nodded toward a small side door. "There's a storage room around the corner. I promise it's less complicated than it looks." They walked together through the narrow passage, the silence between them not heavy, only unfamiliar. The air carried the scent of wet stone and the faint promise of coming rain. And somewhere down the street, an old radio hummed a love song neither of them understood. Inside the storage room, the air was cooler. Dust floated like tiny stars through the beams of sunlight, sneaking in from a high window. Adrian set the box on a low table. "Thank you," she said again, brushing a loose strand of hair away with the back of her hand. A thin line of blue paint stretched across her wrist like an accidental bracelet. "Happy to help," he said. There was a pause. She studied him for a quiet moment. The tailored shirt, the watch he kept trying not to make obvious, the posture of someone used to control. But his eyes were tired. Not the tiredness of lack of sleep, but the kind that comes from carrying too much for too long. "You work around here?" she asked lightly. He thought of the tower that bore his name, the endless meetings, the pressure that wrapped around him like armor. "Not exactly," he said. "I've just been trying to get to know the city better. Not a lie, just not the whole truth." Alara nodded, accepting it without question. In her world, people were allowed to keep parts of themselves hidden until they felt safe to reveal them. If only she could offer herself the same grace. He learned her name on a Tuesday. The sky was a clean, endless blue that made the shadows look sharper. Adrian lingered near the studio again, pretending to read a cafe chalkboard menu. Soup of the day, coffee special, pastries by the slice. Ordinary details he rarely noticed. Alara stepped out of the studio, two little boys chasing each other in circles around her. Their cheeks were flushed, their small hands smeared with paint. "Slow down, you'll crash into someone," she called, half laughing. One boy tugged at her sleeve. "Miss Alara, are you coming tomorrow too?" "Of course," she said warmly. "Who else will tell you your dragons need more imagination?" The boys ran off, satisfied. Miss Alara. Adrian let the name settle in his chest. It suited her. Soft, warm. Discovered slowly, not announced loudly. She noticed him and walked over, curiosity brightening her eyes. "You know, most people who walk past this street don't come back. You must like the view." He lifted a corner of his mouth. "Maybe I do." She folded her arms, a subtle smile touching her lips. "Are you one of those people who answers every question with half answers?" "Force of habit," he admitted. "Comes with work." "What do you do?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. He could have told her everything. "I'm Adrian Kingsley. That tower in the skyline, the one in financial magazines? I built it." But instead, he hesitated. "I'm in development," he said softly. "Buildings, projects, things like that." He waited for recognition, the familiar flicker in people's eyes when they connected his name to his empire. But Alara's expression didn't change. Calm, unimpressed, gently uninterested. She didn't know, or maybe she knew and chose not to show it. Either way, for the first time in years, Adrian felt like just a man talking to just a woman on an ordinary street. "And you?" he asked. "Do you teach here?" Her eyes flickered. Just for a moment, a shadow he didn't understand. Then she nodded. "Something like that. I help with the art programs. It's nothing official. Just kids who need a place to pour their feelings onto paper." "Sounds important," he said. "It feels important," she replied quietly. Some of them don't have anywhere else to be heard. There was a knowing ache in her voice, a quiet history, a hidden wound. He wanted to ask who hadn't listened to her. But not yet. Not today, Adrian, he said finally, offering his name the way people offer trust. No title, no armor, just the truth. Ilara, she responded, as if offering him something equally small and important. They didn't know it then, but the world had already shifted. He began measuring his days differently after that. Contracts still needed signing. Meetings still demanded his presence. Analysts still spoke about projections and markets and forecasts. But now, there were also quiet minutes stolen on a narrow street where children ran barefoot across warm pavement, where laughter echoed off brick instead of glass, where a woman in a worn sweater wrote in a notebook as if her heart lived inside the pages. Sometimes, he sat in the cafe across the street, pretending to check emails. But he watched her. He noticed the way she smiled differently for each child, how she crouched low to see their drawings, how she hugged her notebook close when she thought no one was looking. Sometimes, she caught him staring. She'd raise an eyebrow as if asking, "Still here?" And he'd nod, small, almost guilty. And something inside her loosened every time. One afternoon, she walked into the cafe and found him already there, sitting by the window with a half-finished cup of coffee. She hesitated, then crossed the room with the tentative bravery of someone stepping into something she wasn't sure she deserved. "Is this seat taken?" she asked. His heart stumbled, literally. The kind of stumble his smartwatch might have flagged. "No, please." She sat across from him, wrapping her hands around her cup like she needed warmth she didn't want to request. For a moment, they simply watched the street. "You're not from this side of the city," she said softly. Adrian smiled without looking at her. "Is it that obvious?" "It's not your clothes," she said. "It's the way you stand, like you're always bracing for something. Like silence makes you suspicious." Her observation slipped under his defenses in a way no negotiation ever had. "And what about you?" he asked. "Where do you seem to be from?" She traced the rim of her cup. "People assume they know," she murmured. "Old jacket, cheap bag, cracked phone screen. They think that tells the whole story." "Does it?" he asked quietly. She paused. "No," she whispered. "Not even close." He didn't push. He simply nodded. A silent agreement between two people who understood that everyone carries more than the world sees. If only he knew exactly how much she carried. If only she knew how familiar her secrets would feel to him. Nights began to change too. Adrian lay awake in his apartment overlooking the city, its lights flickering like restless fireflies. His mind used to replay numbers, projections, risks. Now it replayed moments. The way she tilted her head when curiosity tugged at her. The way she laughed with her whole body, unguarded and bright. The way her eyes drifted far away sometimes, as if she stood between two worlds. He found himself wondering about her when he should have been thinking about mergers. Why does she work there? Where does she go at night? Who calls her when she's alone? He didn't know she lay awake too, inside a small rented room with peeling paint and a window that overlooked nothing important. Except her room wasn't as simple as it seemed. Behind the wardrobe, hidden in a box beneath old scarves, were pieces of a life she never spoke about. A gleaming watch with a family crest, a passport with a different last name, a photograph of a house too large to ever feel like home. In the photo, a younger Ilara stood beside a sharply dressed man, his hand on her shoulder like an obligation. Her smile was polite, practiced, empty. She turned the photo face down and closed the box. The life she left behind didn't fit the story people believed about her now. "Let them think I have nothing," she thought. "It's easier than explaining why I left everything." But as the night stretched on, one truth echoed louder. She didn't want to lie to him. Their connection grew in the quiet spaces between confessions. He learned she loved rainy days because they made the city honest. She learned he carried a notebook too, filled with sketches of buildings the world had not yet seen. Sometimes she closed the studio late and found him waiting beneath the street lamp. "Walk you home?" he would ask. She'd hesitate, for reasons he couldn't see, then nod. They walked side by side through alleys scented with spices and detergent, past windows glowing with family dinners and laughter, past stray cats darting beneath cars. They talked about everything safe, favorite books, first trips to the ocean, the sound of trains at night. But there were things they didn't say. He didn't tell her his company owned half the abandoned buildings near her street. She didn't tell him she had grown up in a mansion that overlooked the tower with his name on it. They were two people walking beneath the same streetlights, each carrying a truth heavy enough to break what they were building. Neither was ready for the breaking. Not yet. One evening, as they reached the corner where they usually separated, a soft drizzle began to fall. Streetlights blurred into halos of gold. She tightened her sweater. He watched the raindrops gather in her hair, turning it darker, softer. "You should get inside," he said quietly. "You'll catch a cold." She smiled faintly. "I've survived worse than rain." He wanted to ask what. He wanted to know everything. But he only nodded. A quiet pause stretched between them, long enough to ask a question without words. "Adrian," she said softly. "Yes?" "If someone lied to you," she whispered, searching the ground, "but not to hurt you, just to survive, would you hate them for it?" His breath caught. Her voice trembled behind its calm. He didn't know she was reaching out from the edge of her secret. "I think," he said slowly, "I'd want to know why they lied. The reason matters. Sometimes we wear masks because the world doesn't give us a choice." She swallowed. "And if the truth hurt," she murmured. "Truth always hurts," he replied gently, "but lies hurt longer." She looked up at him, eyes shining with something more than rain. "You sound like someone who's been lied to," she whispered. He gave a small, sad smile. "You sound like someone who's had to lie." The city hummed around them. Cars, rain, a flickering neon sign. Neither of them moved. For a moment, it felt like everything held its breath. She opened her mouth, ready to say something heavy, maybe the truth, but her phone vibrated. She flinched. A name flashed across her cracked screen, one she never showed anyone. She declined it with trembling fingers. Adrian saw the fear in her eyes, the tension in her shoulders, but said nothing. She forced a small smile. "Good night, Adrian. Good night, Alara." She walked into the rain. He watched her go, feeling a question settle over him like a storm cloud. What is she running from? She walked faster, pressing her hand over the phone, feeling the echo of the name she'd rejected. How much longer can I hide? She had no idea her past was already moving closer, and he had no idea that the truth he'd asked for would one day shatter everything they'd found. The city outside her window glowed like a fractured constellation, tiny lights flickering against the dark, unaware of the storm rising quietly inside one small rented room. Alara sat frozen in the chair, her breath shallow, her heartbeat impossibly loud. 2 weeks. 2 weeks before her past slammed back into her present. 2 weeks before everything she'd built, every quiet joy, every stolen moment, threatened to crumble beneath her feet. She pressed her forehead against her knees, whispering into the small hollow her body created. "I finally found something real. Please don't take it from me." But she knew the voice on the phone hadn't been a threat. It had been a promise. Her disappearance hadn't gone unnoticed, and her return wasn't a request. It was a demand. The next morning was cruelly beautiful. Sunlight spilled across the city, warm and bright, as if the universe was oblivious to her unraveling. Children's voices floated up from the street, cheerful, light, unburdened. She listened, wishing her heart could move with their innocence. But her chest remained tight, knotted with a fear she couldn't shake. When she reached the studio, she found Adrian waiting at the corner. He wasn't leaning casually as he usually did. He looked concerned, focused, as if he'd been standing there longer than he would ever admit. Her pulse jumped. "Ilara," he said softly, stepping toward her. "You look exhausted." She forced a smile. Rough night. Because of the ghosts? He asked quietly. Her breath caught, but she nodded. Something like that. He didn't pry. He simply walked beside her toward the studio door. But she felt his gaze lingering, searching, questioning, caring more than he should, more than she deserved. Inside, the children pulled her into their chaos of colors and laughter, but she wasn't fully present. Her smiles felt thin. Her hands trembled slightly when she lifted a paintbrush. Her eyes kept drifting toward the door, as if she expected someone unwelcome to appear at any moment. Adrian noticed everything. He spent the afternoon in the cafe across the street pretending to read emails, but every few minutes his eyes rose to the window, watching her, worry spreading through him like a silent bruise. By late afternoon, he couldn't take the distance anymore. When she stepped outside to toss paint-stained tissues into the bin, he moved toward her. "You're scared," he said quietly. Her fingers froze around the trash bag. "You don't have to pretend with me," he added gently. A shaky breath slipped out of her. "Adrian, some things can't be shared." He stepped closer, though he kept enough distance to let her breathe. "Is someone hurting you?" "No." The lie came too quickly. "No, it's not like that." "Then what is it?" he pressed softly. She shook her head, her eyes glistening. "Some truths destroy the people who hear them." He held her gaze. "Or they free them." She looked away, swallowing hard. "Not in my case." A long silence stretched between them, thick with emotion, heavy with the truths she couldn't speak, and the comfort he desperately wanted to offer. Then he said something that broke her entirely. "Alara, I care about you." The world tilted beneath her feet. She opened her mouth to warn him, to push him away, to protect him, but her voice refused to come. He noticed her struggle, and instead of stepping back, he stepped closer. "I'm not asking for everything," he said softly. "Just don't shut me out." Her throat tightened. Her eyes stung. "I don't want to shut you out," she whispered. "But if you get too close, you might regret it." "I'll take that risk," he murmured. She closed her eyes. "I won't." And before he could say another word, she turned and walked back inside. But Adrian had already made a quiet, unshakable decision. He wouldn't lose her to shadows. Not now. Not when she was finally starting to trust him, even if only through her silence. That night, Ilara sat on her bed, staring at her notebook, the same one she pressed to her chest whenever the world felt too heavy. She opened it, revealing pages filled with sketches, fragments of stories, pieces of dreams she no longer believed she deserved. On one page, a drawing of a house, tall, imposing, painfully perfect, stared back. Her childhood home, her prison. On the opposite page was a sketch of Adrian, drawn from memory, from stolen glances across cafe windows, from quiet walks under street lamps. His eyes in the sketch were softer than in real life, because she had drawn them with the affection she hadn't yet admitted aloud. She touched the pencil outline of his face. "I'm sorry," she whispered. But a small part of her, the part she kept trying to bury, whispered back, "Maybe you don't have to run this time." Meanwhile, Adrian sat alone in his penthouse, staring at the skyline that once filled him with pride. Now it felt like a cage of glittering walls. He couldn't focus, couldn't read, couldn't think. Images of Alara drifted through his mind. The fear in her eyes, the tension in her shoulders, the sadness she hid too well. He pressed his hands together. Who was she running from? What kind of life leaves shadows that deep? Then another thought hit him, sharper, colder. What if she leaves without saying goodbye? The idea hollowed him. He didn't want to lose her. He didn't want to stand quietly while her past dragged her back into a world that didn't deserve her. "What are you hiding, Alara?" he whispered into the empty room. And why did the answer already frighten him? The next few days unfolded like the calm before a storm. Alara tried to act normal, tried to smile, teach, guide, reassure. But Adrian saw through every layer. She kept her distance from him with careful precision, as if being near him alone might cause catastrophe. She didn't meet him for coffee. She didn't let him walk her home. She didn't linger in their conversations. He didn't push, but her retreat stung deeply. Still, there were moments. Small, fragile, fleeting moments. When their hands brushed and her breath caught. When she looked at him with eyes full of unspoken truths. When her guard cracked, revealing all the warmth she tried to hide. When hope slipped through despite the fear tightening her chest. And those moments were enough to keep him near, even as she kept trying to step away. By the end of the week, the countdown screamed louder in her mind. 7 days left. 7 days before she was expected to return to the world she hated. The world she had abandoned, but that still claimed ownership of her name. 7 days before Adrian discovered the truth, whether she wanted him to or not. That evening, as she walked home with trembling hands shoved into her pockets, she felt it, a presence behind her. The air shifted. A cold ripple traveled up her spine. She turned. A black car idled across the street. A man in a dark suit leaned against it, arms crossed, eyes fixed on her. Her blood froze. He didn't smile, didn't move. He simply watched. A silent message, a warning, a reminder. She stepped back, pulse frantic, then turned away, walking quickly, then faster, until she nearly ran. For the first time since leaving her old life, the past wasn't calling. It was following. The next morning, she arrived at the studio pale and shaken, her hands trembling as she unlocked the door. Adrian saw her from across the street and felt dread coil in his stomach. He crossed the road in urgent strides. "Ilara," he said, voice tight. "What's wrong?" She swallowed, unable to steady herself. "Ilara, look at me." She lifted her eyes. And in them, he saw something he had never seen before. Fear, real, devastating, consuming. He stepped closer. "You're in danger." She shook her head violently. "No, I'm not. You shouldn't be here right now." "Ilara, please," she begged, her voice cracking. "Just leave before things get worse." He froze. She had never spoken to him like that. She opened the studio door and slipped inside, closing it firmly behind her. Adrian stood there for several seconds, breathing hard, staring at the door she had disappeared behind. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. And he wasn't going to let her face it alone, not anymore, because love was no longer a quiet possibility. It had become a responsibility, a promise, a vow he had never spoken, but deeply felt. And somewhere in the shadows of the city, the truth about Ilara Dean, her real name, her real world, her real past, was drawing closer, preparing to collide with him and change everything forever. The day unfolded like a fragile thread stretched too tight. Inside the art studio, Ilara moved through the motions of teaching, helping children mix colors, guiding shaky hands, smiling when she needed to. But none of it reached her eyes. Her laughter had lost its warmth. Her shoulders stayed tense, as if she were bracing for a blow only she could see coming. Outside, Adrian remained close. He walked the block twice, sat in the cafe, stood by the railing, checked the studio door every few minutes. But he didn't approach her again, not yet. He could sense she was drowning in something deeper than fear, something that needed patience instead of pressure. Still, every silent minute felt like a countdown he couldn't read. By late afternoon, the sky darkened into muted silver and deep blue, the kind of colors that often came before a storm. Wind swept through the narrow street, carrying dust and old dreams in its restless current. Ilara stepped out of the studio, shaking chalk from her hands. She pulled her sweater tighter around herself, scanning the street out of instinct. Her eyes lingered on the spot where she had seen the man in the black suit. She exhaled slowly when she didn't find him, but the relief was thin. Adrian saw her from across the road and crossed before she could walk away. "Ilara," he called gently. She flinched. He slowed his pace, keeping his voice soft, careful. Please don't shut me out. She looked down, her hair falling like a curtain between them. I didn't want you to come today. And yet, he said with a faint, sad smile, I couldn't stay away. Her breath trembled. Ilara, talk to me, he whispered. I can't, she replied, the pain clear in her voice. If you knew what was happening, then tell me. She looked up, eyes shimmering with fear and longing. It'll pull you into a world you don't deserve. He shook his head. Let me decide what I deserve. Her heart clenched painfully. A gust of wind swept between them, lifting her loose hair, tugging at the edge of his jacket. It carried the faint metallic scent of coming rain, a warning of things about to break. Ilara, he sensed softly. You're not alone. You don't have to go through this alone. She swallowed, and for a second, a small, beautiful second, she wanted to believe him. She wanted to let him hold the truth with her. She wanted to let him in completely. But then, her phone buzzed. The same name. The same chilling pull of a world she had left behind. Her face went pale. Adrian saw it, every emotion flickering across her features. Fear, panic, guilt, secrets clawing their way toward the surface. He reached out instinctively. Ilara. She stepped back as if burned. Don't. He froze, his arms suspended in midair. Her voice dropped to a whisper, raw and trembling. Please, Adrian, don't make this harder. Harder? His voice cracked with hurt. Ilara, I'm trying to help you. You can't. Her breath broke. No one can. And then she turned, not slowly, not gracefully, but with urgency, almost desperation, hurrying down the sidewalk, as if she needed to outrun the feelings, curling painfully inside her. He stood there, rooted to the pavement, watching her retreat. A hollow ache spread through his chest. Why won't she trust me? But an even more frightening question followed. What is she protecting me from? Ilara didn't stop walking until she reached the quiet alley behind her apartment building. She pressed a hand to her stomach, fighting the urge to collapse. The call hadn't just been a reminder. It had been a deadline, a final warning. She let out a shaky breath. I have to tell him. The words tasted like fear, but before she could decide anything, a shadow shifted at the corner of the building. A tall figure stepped forward, the same man from the black car. Ilara Dean, he said smoothly. Or should I say, Ilara Veilheart? Her blood ran cold. No, she whispered. Not here. He smirked. You've been very difficult to track down. The family is losing patience. Her chest constricted. I told you, I'm not coming back. He shrugged. That's not your decision. Your father wants you home, and so does the board. I'm not part of that world anymore. You are his heir, the man snapped. You don't get to walk away from a dynasty. She shook her head violently. I walked away because I never wanted any of it. Too bad, he said, stepping closer. Decisions were made long before you were born. She stumbled back, shoulders slamming against the cold brick wall. I'm not going back, his jaw tightened. If you don't return willingly, the media will learn where the lost Veilheart daughter has been hiding. And once your identity is exposed, his eyes glinted. That boy you've been spending time with, Adrian Kingsley, isn't it? He will know exactly who you are. Her heart dropped to her feet. Leave him out of this, she whispered. Oh, the man sneered. So you care about him. Her silence was answer enough. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. 2 weeks, or we expose everything. She felt the ground tilt beneath her. Her voice cracked. You don't understand. If he finds out like that, it will destroy him. Then tell him yourself, the man said coldly, before someone else does. And with that, he turned and disappeared into the dim street like a shadow dissolving into another shadow. Ilara slid down against the wall, trembling uncontrollably. Her real name, Ilara Veilheart, felt like a chain tightening around her chest. The heir of one of the richest private empires in the country. A dynasty known for ruthlessness, power, and legacy. A life built on money she had never wanted. A world she had escaped because it suffocated her. How will Adrian ever forgive this? She whispered to herself. Because Adrian didn't just dislike that world, he despised it. He had built everything with his own hands. He had escaped his own past with sheer will. He hated the kind of powerful families who treated people like assets. And she was born into the very world he resented. If he learned the truth, would he ever look at her the same way again? The evening bled into night. Ilara stayed curled on her bed, staring at the wall as rain tapped against the window. Across the city, Adrian sat in his dark penthouse, not even pretending to work anymore. He kept replaying the way she had stepped back from him. The fear, the urgency, the guilt. He knew she was hiding something, but he also knew this. She wasn't afraid for herself. She was afraid for him. Why? What truth could hurt him more than losing her would? Around midnight, before he could talk himself out of it, Adrian grabbed his coat and keys. He needed to see her. Needed to make sure she was safe. Needed to tell her that whatever she was facing, she wouldn't face it alone. But when he arrived at her building, he stopped at the bottom of the stairs. A black luxury car idled across the street. The same one. His jaw tightened. His pulse spiked. A suited man stood near it, half in shadow, smoking calmly as if guarding something or someone. Adrian's breath turned sharp. Someone was after her. Someone was watching her. And Ilara had known. The truth hit him hard. She wasn't pulling away because she didn't trust him. She was pulling away because she was trying to protect him. He swallowed, emotion thickening his voice as he spoke into the night. Ilara, what are you trapped in? He looked up at her dimly lit window, worry twisting into something else entirely. Determination. If she was running from something, or someone, he would run with her. If she was hiding from a world, he would stand between her and it. He wasn't letting her disappear. Not now, not ever. And somewhere in the room above, Ilara sat with her head in her hands, whispering a truth she feared he would never hear. I love you. That's the problem. Because loving him meant losing him, and hiding from him meant breaking him. She didn't know yet, couldn't know, that Adrian Kingsley was not the kind of man who walked away. The storm was coming, but so was he.